Hi and welcome to the channel. Today is day 6 of covering society and social justice for mains exam, and I will also be covering the essay selection part of it. So since today is day 6, I expect that you have covered the following topics: role of women and women's organization, effect of globalization on Indian society, salient features of Indian society, communalism, regionalism, secularism, population, social empowerment, and poverty. This topic has to be covered from both aspects of GS1 and GS2. So this was Monday to Saturday. On Sunday, most people prefer to write and practice their essay exam and take stock. I would suggest, if in the later part of the mains exams, don't take a break on Sundays. But if it gets too overwhelming or the week has been very pressurizing, you can take half day off, and the other part of the day you can write 1 to 2 essay, giving you a sense of satisfaction and a bit to relax. So how are we going to approach essays? Today I will give you a brief idea on how to select essay that suits your needs, how you can best write for it, how write for it to understand the topic that will suit you. And I will in the end give you 2 topics, of which you can choose one and write tomorrow, or you can write both. And what I will do tomorrow is discuss those essays. Tomorrow is completely a day dedicated to essay. Do not cover society or social issues tomorrow. Now, I have also not seen these topics, and I will be choosing them before you, assessing them, testing and deciding which one to choose before you only. So this is the paper from 2024. What I will do is, for 24 I will take one essay topic from section A, and for 23 I will take one from section B. So let's start. Okay, forest precede civilization and deserts follow them. What I do is, as soon as I read, I just write whatever comes to my mind pertaining to that topic. This is not the final way to do it, just a way to ensure that nothing leaves you. The doctor, the true man of science. As I said, I have also read these topics for the first time, and I'm just writing whatever comes to my mind, the first thing that comes to my mind. Future empire of the mind. I think of it in more. This is my first assessment of just reading the topics within the first 2 to 3 minutes, what I think of these topics. Now, there is a tendency in UPSC to go for philosophical essays in the past couple of years, and a lot of people are afraid of that. But let me tell you, those are actually the easier topics to write, because the beauty there is, once you have understood the topic, you can mold it according to yourself and what you think should be the answer. There is no right and wrong in an essay, especially a philosophical essay. What is required is the ability to write on that topic convincingly, not whether you have interpreted it correctly or not. Now, in these essays, my tendency would be not to take this topic, because I don't think I've completely understood this, and I don't think I have enough examples. So the first thing, whenever I look at an essay and or trying to shortlist an essay, the first thing that I do is whether I can understand or explain the topic to myself. Second thing is whether I can come up instantly on first look. Not always this happens, but my preference is that only, whether I can come up with a unique introduction or conclusion for that topic. Because, as I said, with a lot of philosophical essays, it's about how you write rather than whether you're correct or not. I tend to go for essays for which I can instantly think of a unique introduction, because introduction is the way you stand out. An examiner has a lot of copies. Humans usually within the first 1 minute of looking at anything, of seeing anybody, make their assumptions. If you can make the first 5 to 10 lines, that is the introduction, eye-catching or interesting for them, they have a tendency to read your essay more thoroughly. With the and already being impressed by the introduction, you get marks there also. So, as I said, this is a topic I've already removed. Let's see. The doubter is a true man of science. This is not a very philosophical point. The only thing is that science requires questions, constant improvement, constant questioning, and logic. A person who is doing this constantly can be called a man of science. I can think of a couple of examples, people who have not accepted the old path and have gone with new path. Newton, I would include with men of science, people who have also culturally or socially made changes. So Raja Mohan Roy, maybe Jyotibai Phule, people who fought a lot for women's education because they questioned why it was wrong or right. Even people who were anti-caste, people who were for the removal of caste or saying that caste is discriminatory, things like that. So those, because what they did was they didn't accept the status quo, they went for questions and logic, and when it didn't stay true to that, they discarded it. But this is not an essay I would go with, just because I cannot immediately think of a lot of examples. Happiness is the path, journey is more important than the destination. This one is a very, if you break it down here, this becomes a very standard answer, that you can connect it to life, that the purpose of life is to live it to the fullest, things like that. You can connect it to there is always another mountain to cross, another trophy to achieve. A human will never be satisfied if that's the way they look at it. You can make it into how best to live a satisfied or a happy life, something like that. Not something I want to write about, so my tendency will be to go for this one. Forests precede civilization and deserts follow them. So now let's break down a bit more why I am choosing this one. Let me just write it down first. Forests precede civilization and deserts follow them. Now, the problem here is that this is a very negative statement. Negative because according to them it's always the case. So one thing you need to be able to do is disprove it, especially since I don't agree completely with it, so I would have a tendency to disprove it after giving some examples of yes, this has happened before. Let's see, if I'm thinking of an introduction for this, as I said, I have a tendency to go for a unique introduction that I can think of. I would do a picturization of it in two ways. One is describing the moment of Chipko, of let's say Chipko is the first one, other is deforestation example. So let's say how, if I'm going with Chipko, what I would think of the fact that the engines were stalling, the men with their pickaxe were waiting and watching in awe and anger as the woman hugged the trees and refused to move even with the threat of death. The woman knew that this is the moment that will define their future, their children's future. These forests, sacred to them, have been here before the humans were, and it was up to them to ensure that they're not cut down and turn this area into a desert, as countless many have. It is up to us humans to ensure that integration exists between the forest and the villagers to ensure survival of both. It is the rule, survival of both the villager and the forest depends on each other. Forest precedes civilization, and for civilizations to thrive, they have to continue, not deserts, something like that. This is obviously a very rough draft. I have not thought of everything, but my tendency is to utilize knowledge that already exists for me. So since those are my strong suit, I have a tendency to pick from history, from constitution, from even movies, or any other story that I could think of. I am not good with quotes or things of that nature, so I usually don't use them. If you can remember, that's always better, especially because those are just two-liners and can always be catchy. It depends on what is your strong suit. If I couldn't have thought of the Chipko movement thing and connected to the forest thing, I would have used deforestation as the scene, in the sense that imagine this, as far as the eye could see, the trees have been cut down, the animal sounds were gone, there was this eerie silence of death as the whole forest mourned the loss of trees. It is true what they say, forests might precede civilization, but deserts follow them. So that's a very, very small scene depicting deforestation, but it's a scene which places you there and connects to the story. These are not the only ways to do it. You can think of a lot of examples. This is just how I would have used the examples that I could think of. Obviously, this is just the first prototype of an introduction. The more you can think of, the more you can write. Why I'm telling you this is because this is how I proceed with it, because I never want to agree with this completely. So my intro also makes it clear that while some parts of it is true, it is not always true. And my intro, by giving the Chipko example, gives a obviously first example of how coexistence of both is also possible, although a lot of times this does happen. So it gives a positive response in the beginning itself. And the beautiful part is, because it's Chipko movement, I can connect it in the conclusion with that only, by integrating it within the solutions and within the problems itself of the whole essay, and then in the conclusion itself. So I would have gone with this, but you can go with whatever examples you can think of. What I'm going to do tomorrow is discuss this essay more in depth as you've written it. This was just an example of why and what topic I would have chosen in section 1. The other I could have gone with would have most probably been happiness, in the sense because I think I would have used Buddha here, and the message of maybe desire is the root of suffering or something like that. The way to live life is a happy life is to not desire or something like that, but I'm not sure that I could have come up with sufficient examples. That's why I went with forest, because I have a lot of examples etc. that I can think of where I can use this. One thing I will give you is that yes, on the face of it, this looks like an environment essay. Even the examples I have given till now are environment, but you need to think beyond that. You don't need to be restricted to it. For example, apart from examples of environment, I would have taken examples of tribal communities which are part of this environment or forest or connected to it in some way. I would have also taken examples of opposite communities where there was a desert and now they are trying to greenify the place. We can take the example of the African green belt that they are making to separate the Sahara from the rest of the Africa to make it more green and things like that. These are just the contrary examples. The pro examples are very easy. That it seems that a lot of times destruction precedes development. So I could have used that part also. One thing I could definitely use here is Jeremy Bentham, and pursuit of happiness in the sense of many above some. I could have also used Narmada Bachao here. The arguments that were made during that annul can be used in both sense. There is a Supreme Court judgment also, so I could have referred that also. I also had an example in mind of Salim Ali's bird sanctuary in, I think, Kerala. It was going to be, the whole area was going to be drowned to make a dam, but due to Salim Ali's efforts, it was not. These are just some of the points. As I read the essay or I'm trying to think of things, I will write down separately just to see what else I could have written. I would have connected it to the UN's biosphere program, UNAB. We have a lot of biospheres which focus on this coexistence part. Obviously, there is a lot of tribal communities in India which we could have used and things like that. But these are just an examples on the top of my head of what I could have used. So the examples that I've given you till now includes from philosophy, when I mentioned Jeremy Bentham, politics, when I mentioned Narmada Andolan and Supreme Court rulings, international in the sense of when I mentioned the UN biodiversity, biospheres programs, environment, obviously I've given you a couple of examples. If I can think of all the tribal communities, as I've said, in that I can think of the Bishnois and the Chipko movement. Both will be an example of social, not just environment, how they have successfully integrated it. Maybe I can give an example of geographies, that some geographies are very sensitive and even humans, however civilized, cannot afford to make them into a desert. Maybe I would have given an example of Amazon, I'm not sure though. So yeah, so it is not that just because it's an essay on forest, I wouldn't cover other dimensions. It's about what you can remember at that point or think of. I have said Jeremy Bentham is one of the examples, but this is not the only example. If you can think of anybody who has opposed him, you can use that. You can always use Article 21 of the Constitution, and if I'm remembering correctly, Article 48A of the DPSPs and 51A for fundamental duties. The array case in Mumbai will be a very recent case that you could use. So there are a lot of examples which if you could have incorporated in an essay, and I would have just written down everything and see what fits in what dimension and what could have been done. So this is the example of choosing what I would have written. See, please remember that it is not possible to always write an exceptional essay. Sometimes you get an essay which is completely what you have prepared for, but not always. Do not look for a perfect essay. Look for the essay where you can make the most convincing argument, even if it's not the most unique topic that you've picked. Now let's go to the 2023 essay. Now here we are going to use section B. Again, I'm going to pick these in front of you. I've not seen them before. In the past, there has been a tendency that section A would be more philosophical and be a bit more direct, but that has changed in the past couple of years. There is never a guarantee. Girls are weighed down by restriction, boys with demands too equally harmful to discipline. Something like that had been asked before. It's a very standard topic. Mathematics is the music of reason. Now this and the reason scientists part in 2024 sound same. I'm not touching it. Mathematics is not my core area. A society that has more justice is a society that needs more charity. Most people are gonna pick this since I have a law background. Oh, this is most probably what I'm going to go with. I think this has a lot of potential. See, girls are weighed down, boys with demands. I would usually recommend you not to take this because the topic itself is too long to write. To explain this can take a bit of time. To substantiate this is somewhat easy, especially from a sociological point of view, but to write it down repeatedly is a bit of a big issue. Plus, to be frank, I don't like the topic. I find it a bit boring, so I'm not going to take this on. I'm going to go with either this or this because I like the topic, and I think I can write a good answer for these. Now to choose between these two, a society that has more justice is a society that needs less charity. Okay, so here justice does not just mean Code judgments. It means a society made of equity, a society where there is more equality, fraternity and all those things rather than just code judgments. जिस समाज में अधिक न्याय होता है उस समाज को दान की कम आवश्यकता होती है. Okay, basically what they are saying is, if the society is made more equitable and resource distribution is done properly, then there is less need for charity, or you can say free stuff by the government, things like that. Okay, this is a doable question, but I wouldn't go with it. I will need to think on this. I don't think I will go with this. I would go with this one. Education is what remain after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. This is also not a good essay in the terms of that this is also a big line to write. This is also bit complicated to write in the first 2-3 pages to explain what you mean by this. In this particular essay, you will need to explain your point of view in the beginning 1 to 2 pages so that you can properly substantiate your arguments. Otherwise, it will be an issue similar to this essay. Education is forgotten. Okay, one of my reason why I am taking this is because I can think of a very good introduction of rote learning versus understanding of topics, and to be frank, I would most probably take a scene from 3 Idiots as my introduction. Another that I could have taken rote learning, because I'm going at the angle of rote learning versus understanding or wisdom. I have to think of those examples. I seem to remember there was I can think of one is 3 Idiots, the first scene that has been used so many times, the zipper scene, definition scene. I can use it there. The second is I can make up a story on solar eclipse. Seem to remember this scene from, but I can see also this in the sense that social outdated practices teach you to hide in a solar eclipse, but science has taught a person how to, it is a scientific process and nothing to be afraid of, something like that. But yeah, my most probably tendency will be to use the 3 Idiots scene. So this is a big topic that I've taken, and this can become an issue. But to be frank, I could not pick any of them. Mathematics was always a no. This I know I cannot write well, so I'm not taking this. This I can come back to if I can't think more on this topic, but let's give it a try again. Let me write it down. Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. Let's read the Hindi part also. शिक्षा वह है जो विद्यालय में सीखी गई बातों को भूल जाने के बाद भी शेष रह जाती है. Okay, first thing is you can always swap education with wisdom here to make it easier for you to not to confuse it. Let's break it down. What I have already done. I'm going to write this essay from the perspective that what you learn gets left behind, and what you actually understand while you're studying is what you use in life. Now the problem with this essay is that although I have thought of a different introduction, a movie scene, I have to think of dimensions and explanation, and that is where the problem arises. What do you mean? How do I generate dimensions? Now in this topic, the other way to approach is, what do you think of when you think of understanding? So here I will say reasoning, wisdom, logic, no blind faith, things like that. So what I'm going to do is turn this question around, and learnt in school part I will focus on, as in what is the role of school, in the sense that a school is not merely a place where you go to learn facts. A school is a place which teaches you how to behave in society, how to question facts, question how to think, how to be a productive member of the society. These are the things that remain with you long after the facts that you learned have been gone. Okay, so from this perspective, what we can think of, again, people who have questioned. Here I will most probably use Buddha, because he most famously rejected a lot of teachers before he went on his journey, before and after he went on his journey, and finally discovered the path. Bodhisattva, became Bodhisattva in at the Bodh Gaya tree. So I will definitely use him, that whatever he was taught in school, he went beyond it to find the path. Similar for Newton, whatever he was taught in school, he went beyond it, thought of it, things like that. So, but the problem is, this is how I've changed my frame of reference. Behave in society, question, think, reason. Now, how will I write this essay? I will use as I said, the zipper scene from 3 Idiots as my starting point. Then I will say, yes, in the end, the things you merely learn in school is not what remains with you. The things that you didn't even know you were learning in school are what remains. And then I will connect it to introduction of the role of school. And then I will think of more dimensions. So now let's think of dimensions. Role of school in education from political point of view, from economics. So you don't have to go with the pestle approach. It is not possible in a lot of essays. In this one also, it is not completely possible to go with it. I'm just trying to generate examples of what I could have written for these topics. As culture, I said, a thought of Buddha. I can think of some philosophers to write here. For example, the way Socrates taught was very different from how we are taught. He had a very famous Socratic method of asking questions to learn. So I can use that as an example. That is what you learn in school. So that's philosophical example. In the beginning, I will use it in the role of school part. Politics, there is always the easy part of rights and duties, but I don't want to go there. I can use the fact that Rabindranath Tagore had a very different way of teaching. What else can I remember? Maybe some famous teachers, people who have taken different paths to what they were taught. There is always the famous example of Albert Einstein being thrown out of school. There is the part of Ambedkar being made to sit separately and being made fun of school. Might not remember what he studied there, but he remembers the way he was treated. Said education what remains. So that will also be a society example. Ambedkar. In this way you can think of a couple of examples and decide what to write. So what I will do in this is education remains. I will write an intro. I will give an example of the role of schools and people who have thought of it differently. Give a couple of examples substantiating the point. Now in this one, I would not disagree or agree with the point, because I more or less agree with the point. But what I will do is, when I give the example, I will also incorporate the fact that what do you learn in school, and people who have used that learning beyond it. Let's do one thing. First you write this essay, and tomorrow we can discuss this more in detail on how or what could have been incorporated. So the homework for tomorrow is these 2 essays, one from 2024 section A, the forest one, and 2023 section B, the education one. I've given you a way to outline the essay. We will discuss it more in depth on the basis of this outline only. and give the essay a bit more structure. So tomorrow you have to give 3 hours to writing 2 essays. That's the time you get in UPSC. If you're very new to essay writing and haven't written one ever, I'll say take 2 hours and just write one essay. If it's the first time you're writing the essay, you will never not finish it, because in a long time you've written anything in long form, you might be out of habit. In the first 4 or 5 attempts you make, you will leave it in the middle. That's not a problem. At least try to think of all the dimensions you could have written and start writing. By the 3rd or 4th attempt, you would start writing more. So tomorrow essay, nothing to do with society and social justice, and take maybe some time off to relax also. So that's about it. Thank you for watching. Let me know if I can add something more.